It's it's pretty easy to, just get caught up in the day-to-day headlines about the recent conflict. But I think today we're going to kind of like step back a little bit and look at the long game, how Israel's grappling with this like immense task of rebuilding its military.
Yeah.
And trust me, it's way more complicated than just, like placing a bulk order for new weapons.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the recent conflict really, kind of exposed just how crucial certain equipment is, for Israel's defense. And now they're facing this urgent need to restock everything
Right.
from fighter jets and helicopters to tanks and even just like basic ammunition.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit. What are we talking about here? What's the state of their military like right now?
You can think of it this way. The Israeli Air Force has been putting in serious overtime.
Yeah.
Thousands of flight hours were logged during the conflict,
Wow.
pushing aircraft and helicopters well beyond their intended lifespans. It's kind of like running a marathon every day.
Right.
Eventually, things start to break down.
So it's not just about like replacing what was lost in the fighting.
Right.
It's about dealing with the wear and tear
Exactly.
on the equipment that survived.
You got it.
Okay.
And one of the most critical areas here is the state of their Apache helicopter squadrons.
Yeah.
These are crucial for close air support and ground attack missions. But even before the conflict, their availability was a real concern. The sources suggest their readiness was already stretched pretty thin,
Yeah.
and the intense use during the conflict has only made things worse.
And I remember reading that Israel actually asked the U.S. for some used Apaches.
Yeah.
Just as like a temporary fix.
Yeah.
But the U.S. turned them down.
Yeah.
What's the story there?
That denial is a pretty big deal. I think it really highlights the diplomatic tightrope that Israel has to walk.
Yeah.
Even with its closest allies. There are a lot of factors at play here, including the current U.S. administration's stance on certain Israeli policies. It's a delicate situation.
Yeah.
And it means Israel can't always count on immediate support, even for things they might consider essential.
That's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
I think we often hear about the political side of these relationships.
Yeah.
But this is like a real-world example of how those political dynamics can actually translate
Absolutely.
into concrete challenges on the ground.
Yeah, and it gets even more complicated when you factor in the global arms race that's happening right now.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
How does this arms race, impact Israel's ability to actually rebuild?
Just imagine a giant supermarket where everyone is suddenly trying to buy up all the toilet paper and hand sanitizer.
Oh, yeah.
That's kind of what's happening in the global arms market right now.
Wow.
The war in Ukraine, combined with tensions between China and Taiwan, has created this massive surge in demand for weapons.
Right.
And everyone is scrambling to get their hands on whatever they can.
And I'm guessing that's not good news for Israel, who are already facing like a pretty long shopping list.
Not at all. One source quoted a senior official from a major weapons supplier saying, "What's happening now is crazy. The whole world is buying weapons. Everything, of everything."
Wow.
That sums up the frenzy pretty well. It means longer wait times for delivery,
Sure.
higher prices,
Of course.
and just fiercer competition for those limited supplies.
So they're dealing with depleted stockpiles, a global rush for weapons, and potential diplomatic roadblocks.
Yeah,
It sounds like they're trying to rebuild their military while playing a high-stakes game of Tetris.
exactly. They have to strategize not only their military needs, but also navigate the complexities of global markets and international relations. It's a multidimensional challenge.
But where do they even begin? What are their options when it comes to addressing these challenges?
Well, let's start with the Air Force. They're looking at a combination of rapid procurement and creative solutions.
Okay.
First, they're trying to fast-track the acquisition of new aircraft, like F-35s, advanced F-15s, and F-16s.
Uh-huh.
We're talking potentially hundreds of new jets.
Yeah, those are some serious numbers. But we just talked about how the global arms race is making it tougher to get your hands on these things.
Right.
Is it even realistic for them to secure that many aircraft?
That's the big question. It's a seller's market right now.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of countries vying for the same limited supply.
Right.
But there's another angle to this. The sources also mention some innovative approaches they're considering, particularly to address the shortage of Apache helicopters.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What kind of innovative approaches are we talking about here?
This is where it gets fascinating. They're actually looking into repurposing Black Hawk helicopters, which are usually used for transport and medical evacuations, and outfitting them with weapon systems to give them some combat capabilities.
Wait, hold on. Turn a Black Hawk into a gunship?
Yeah.
That sounds like something straight out of an action movie. Is that even feasible?
It might seem unconventional, but it's actually a pretty clever workaround.
Okay.
Blackhawks aren't as specialized or heavily armed as Apaches,
Right.
but they can still be equipped with various weapons like machine guns, rockets, and even missiles.
So they're essentially trying to create a budget-friendly attack helicopter by upgrading existing equipment. It's like a military version of pimping your ride.
It's a resourceful solution, that's for sure, and it highlights just how adaptable they have to be in this environment. But let's delve deeper into the specifics of this strategy and see if it really holds up under scrutiny.
Right, because there are probably some trade-offs involved. Right?
All right.
What are the limitations of this Blackhawk conversion compared to a dedicated attack helicopter like the Apache?
That's a great question, and it leads us to the next layer of this challenge.
Right.
We need to compare the capabilities of these repurposed Blackhawks to the Apaches they're trying to replace.
Okay, I'm ready to dive into the nitty-gritty. Let's talk about firepower armor and how these makeshift attack helicopters would actually perform in combat.
I mean, when it comes to raw firepower, the Apache is in a different league.
Yeah.
It's designed from the ground up as an attack helicopter, with a 30-millimeter chain gun Hellfire missiles for taking out tanks, and a whole suite of other weapons.
So how do the Blackhawks stack up against that? What kind of firepower are we talking about with these conversions?
Well, the sources suggest they're looking at equipping the Blackhawks with a mix of machine guns, rocket pods, and potentially even lightweight missiles. It gives them some punch, but it's definitely not on the same level as the Apache.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like comparing a souped-up sedan to a full-fledged sports car.
Right.
They both get you from point A to point B, but the experience is quite different.
Exactly. And there are other trade-offs to consider.
Okay.
The Apache is heavily armored, designed to take hits and keep flying. The Blackhawk, even with modifications, is going to be more vulnerable in a high-intensity combat environment.
So what does this mean for how they might actually be used? Would they be sent into the same kinds of missions as an Apache?
That's unlikely. The sources suggest they're thinking of these modified Blackhawks more for border security, counterterrorism operations, and potentially providing close air support to ground troops. But in lower threat situations.
So they're more like a tactical tool
Yeah.
for specific scenarios, not a direct replacement for the Apache in all its capabilities.
That's a good way to put it. It's about maximizing their resources and finding creative solutions to fill gaps. But they're being realistic about the limitations of this approach.
This whole situation really underscores the importance of not putting all your eggs in one basket, so to speak.
Yeah.
Relying too heavily on one type of equipment can leave you vulnerable if those systems become unavailable or outdated.
You're hitting on a key concept in military planning diversification. They need a mix of platforms and capabilities to be truly resilient. And this is where the global arms race really throws a wrench into the equation.
Right? Because we can't forget that they're competing with other countries who are also trying to modernize and stock up. What are some of the specific weapon systems that are in high demand right now?
Well, the sources point to a few categories. Precision-guided munitions, like those Hellfire missiles we talked about earlier, are at the top of everyone's list. They're highly effective, but they're also expensive and complex to manufacture, which limits the supply.
So it's not just about having the money to buy them, it's about whether they're even available in the first place.
Exactly. And then there's the demand for long-range missiles and rocket systems. These are seen as game changers in modern warfare, and everyone wants to enhance their strike capabilities.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
In a conflict, the ability to hit targets from afar gives you a significant tactical advantage. But what does this mean for Israel? If these systems are in such high demand, does that put them at a disadvantage?
Potentially. They have to be strategic in their acquisitions. They can't simply buy everything they want. They have to prioritize what's most crucial for their defense posture. And this brings us back to the diplomatic challenges they face, particularly with the U.S.
Right, because even if they have the money and can find a supplier, there's still the hurdle of getting approval for certain types of weapons.
Yeah.
It's like trying to buy a new car when your parents have veto power over your choice.
That's a good analogy. And remember, those munitions stuck in Boeing warehouses because of the Biden administration's hold.
Yeah.
Those are likely precision-guided bombs and missiles.
Okay.
Exactly, the kind of systems that are in high demand globally.
So it's a double whammy.
Yeah.
Not only are they facing delays and restrictions from their main supplier, but they're also competing with other countries who are eager to snap up those same systems.
It's a tough spot to be in. And this is where the budgetary constraints really come into play.
Yeah.
The sources suggest that even with increased defense spending, they're going to have to make some tough choices.
They're essentially playing a game of budgetary Tetris, trying to fit all these urgent needs into a limited space. It's like deciding whether to spend your limited budget on a fancy new coffee maker or fixing the leaky roof.
Right.
Both are important,
Yeah.
but you can't always have both.
And just like that leaky roof, some of these needs are more urgent than others.
Sure.
They have to balance immediate requirements with long-term planning,
Go ahead.
and this is where the internal political debate comes in.
You're referring to that quote from Finance Minister Smotrich, right?
Exactly.
The one where he said, "The blanket is short and you need to be a magician to meet the needs."
Yeah.
He was initially skeptical about the Air Force's request for more fighter jets.
Right.
But I'm guessing this situation might force a shift in priorities.
Absolutely. When you're facing shortages and delays in essential equipment,
Yeah.
you have to reevaluate your priorities.
Right?
And this is where strategic thinking becomes crucial. It's not just about replenishing what was lost.
Right.
It's about adapting to a new reality.
Okay, so let's talk about adaptation. How might these challenges force Israel to rethink its military doctrine and the way it approaches defense?
That's a really important question, and it gets to the heart of how these challenges are not just about logistics and procurement,
Yeah.
but about fundamental strategic shifts.
So we're not just talking about swapping out old equipment for new ones. We're talking about potentially changing the playbook altogether.
Exactly. And one area where we're seeing this play out is in the increasing reliance on unmanned systems,
Okay.
particularly drones.
Okay, so let's talk drones.
Yeah.
How are they changing the game, and what role are they likely to play in Israel's future military strategy?
Drones have proven to be incredibly effective in recent conflicts, and they're only getting more sophisticated.
Yeah.
They can provide surveillance, gather intelligence, and even carry out strikes with incredible precision,
Right.
all while keeping human pilots out of harm's way.
So they're like a force multiplier.
Yeah.
They allow you to do more with fewer resources.
Right.
Which is especially valuable when you're facing those budgetary constraints we talked about.
Precisely. And they're also changing the nature of warfare itself.
Really?
We're moving towards a more networked, remotely controlled battlefield,
Wow.
where information and speed are paramount.
That sounds like a major shift in how wars are fought.
Yeah.
It's almost like we're stepping into the realm of science fiction with drones becoming the new face of combat.
It's certainly a dramatic transformation, and Israel's at the forefront of this technological revolution. They've been investing heavily in drone technology for years,
Yes.
and they're constantly developing new capabilities.
So how might this shift towards drone warfare impact Israel's overall defense strategy?
Well, it has the potential to make them even more agile and adaptable.
I got
They
it.
can deploy drones quickly and discreetly without the logistical challenges of traditional air power.
Right.
It gives them more options
Yeah.
and potentially even levels the playing field against adversaries with larger conventional forces.
That's a really interesting point. It's like they're using technology to compensate for some of the limitations they face in terms of manpower and resources.
Exactly. And it allows them to tailor their response to specific threats, whether it's border infiltration, terrorist activity, or even full-scale conflict.
This is all really fascinating, but I can't help but think about the ethical implications of this shift towards drone warfare. I know this isn't the focus of our deep dive, but it's hard to ignore the concerns about automation and the potential for unintended consequences.
It's a valid point, and it's a conversation that needs to happen alongside these technological advancements. As with any powerful tool, there's always the potential for misuse.
Right.
And it's crucial to have ethical frameworks and safeguards in place.
Absolutely. But for now, let's bring it back to the immediate challenges facing Israel.
Okay.
They're navigating this complex web of depleted stockpiles, a global arms race, diplomatic hurdles, and budgetary constraints, all while trying to adapt to the changing nature of warfare.
It's a lot to juggle. And it's a reminder that even in the face of these challenges, innovation and adaptability are key to survival.
They're having to think outside the box, find creative solutions, and be willing to embrace new technologies to maintain their security in a rapidly changing world.
Exactly. And this brings us to another crucial aspect of their strategy: international partnerships and alliances.
Oh.
They can't go it alone in this environment.
Okay, so let's talk alliances. Who are Israel's key partners, and how might these relationships be impacted by the challenges we've been discussing? So we've been talking about Israel's efforts to rebuild and adapt its military
Right.
in the face of some pretty serious challenges.
Yeah.
But they're not doing this in a vacuum, are they? They got a network of international partnerships
Right.
that play a crucial role in their security.
Alliances are more important than ever, I think, in today's interconnected world,
Right.
especially when you're dealing with resource constraints
Yeah.
and, a rapidly evolving security landscape.
So who are Israel's key partners, and how are these relationships evolving in light of all the challenges we've been discussing?
Well, the U.S. remains their most important ally.
Okay.
Despite the diplomatic complexities we talked about earlier, the relationship's deep-rooted
Yeah.
and multifaceted. It encompasses everything from military aid and intelligence sharing
Right.
to economic cooperation and technological collaboration.
But we also talked about those tensions regarding certain weapons systems
Yeah.
and the Biden administration's stance on some Israeli policies.
Uh-huh.
How are those dynamics impacting the relationship on a practical level?
It's definitely creating some friction. The delays in procurement and the restrictions on certain types of aid are causing frustration on the Israeli side.
Yeah.
And it's leading them to explore alternative partnerships.
So they're not putting all their eggs in the U.S. basket anymore.
Exactly. They're diversifying their relationships both in terms of procurement
Yeah.
and strategic cooperation.
Mm.
We're seeing closer ties with countries like India, which has become a major arms exporter and a key player in the Indo-Pacific region.
That's interesting.
Mm.
What's driving this closer relationship with India?
There's a convergence of interests. Both countries see eye to eye on the threat of terrorism
Mm-hmm.
and the need for regional stability. They're also both keen on technological collaboration,
Right.
particularly in areas like drones, cybersecurity, and artificial intelligence.
It's like they're forming a strategic tag team to address common challenges.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay.
And they're not just looking east. There's also a growing emphasis on partnerships with European countries,
Yeah.
particularly those with strong defense industries like France and Germany.
But haven't there been some historical and political differences between Israel and some European countries?
There have been, but the security landscape is shifting,
Yeah.
and those differences are being put aside in the face of shared concerns,
Okay.
like the rise of extremism and the
Yeah.
proliferation of advanced weaponry. The threat landscape is evolving, and traditional alliances are being reshaped in response.
It's like a giant game of Risk, where everyone is realigning their alliances based on the changing power dynamics and perceived threats.
That's a pretty accurate analogy.
Yeah.
And Israel is playing this game very strategically, leveraging its strengths and seeking out partnerships that enhance its security and advance its interests. They're not just reacting to events.
Right.
They're actively shaping the playing field.
So they're not just looking for handouts or quick fixes. They're building long-term relationships that could provide both immediate support and strategic depth.
Precisely. It's a multi-layered approach, and it's driven by a recognition that in today's world, no nation can truly stand alone.
This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, from the nuts and bolts of military hardware to the complexities of international relations and the evolving nature of warfare.
It's a fascinating case study, and it provides valuable insights into the challenges and opportunities facing many nations in this era of rapid technological change and geopolitical uncertainty.
So if we were to distill all of this down to one key takeaway for our listener, what would it be?
I would say the key takeaway is this. Adaptability is the new imperative. The world is changing at an unprecedented pace,
Right.
and those who can adapt, innovate, and build strong partnerships will be the ones who thrive in this new reality.
It's about recognizing that the old ways of doing things may no longer be sufficient, and being willing to embrace new technologies, forge new alliances, and rethink traditional approaches to security.
Exactly. And that brings us to a final thought-provoking question for our listener to consider.
Okay.
How will this emphasis on adaptability and innovation shape the future of warfare, not just for Israel,
Right.
but for all of us?
It's a question that deserves careful consideration. The answers will likely have profound implications for international relations, global security, and the very nature of conflict in the years to come.
And those answers are being shaped right now in research labs, on training grounds, and in the corridors of power around the world.
So stay informed, stay curious, and keep asking questions. The future is being written as we speak, and it's up to all of us to engage in the conversations that will shape it.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking. Until next time, keep exploring.